Don't move, ma'am. Hands up now. That's what one of them barked, just before they pulled the trigger. The crackle of a taser ripped through the silence. She didn't even scream, just dropped. The coffee cup she was holding exploded across the pavement. You won't believe what happened next. Her purse hit the curb, and she collapsed, limp, twitching still. They turned to him next, an older man in a worn brown jacket. Both hands already raised, calm, unshaken. A younger officer stepped forward, voice sharp with adrenaline. Back up, old man. You're next. He didn't speak, not at first. He just looked straight at the team leader, the one with the radio clipped to his chest, and said 5 words, call Admiral Wren right now. And just like that, the team froze. No one lowered their weapons, but no one moved either. The air shifted, radios crackled, and for the first time, someone hesitated. If 5 words can stop trained men in their tracks, type respect in the comments. And if you believe real strength speaks calmly, subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories. Most folks in Rockridge knew Ellis Monroe as the guy with the dusty blue truck. He lived 2 blocks from the post office in a weathered brick house with wind chimes that barely moved. His lawn was always cut. His porch always swept. And if your mower wouldn't start, Ellis would have it running again before you finished explaining the problem. At 74, his back didn't straighten like it used to. But his eyes were steady, quiet, like they'd already seen everything worth reacting to. He never talked about what he'd done before retiring. Most people figured he was just another small-town mechanic who'd outlived the loud years. But every Friday, like clockwork, he drove to the county shelter and rebuilt wheelchairs for disabled vets. And every other Tuesday, he spent 2 hours at the high school, not teaching, just listening. He never missed a morning walk, never left his tools outside overnight. And he always came home with a coffee for his wife, Nora. She was his rhythm. 46 years of marriage had made them more like gravity than routine, constant, necessary, unseen by most. Nora knew the real stories, the ones about deployments that never made headlines. About operations too buried for medals. About the time Ellis had to make a call that saved lives but cost him years of sleep. But those stories stayed between them, told once quietly and never brought up again. They had no children, just a rhythm. He fixed things. She kept them warm. That Tuesday started like any other. Ellis had just finished replacing a radiator for Mrs. Langston across the street. Nora left early for the gas station around the corner. It was senior discount day, and she always liked being the first in line before the coffee went stale. The leaves were just beginning to turn. The town was still quiet, and Ellis was wiping his hands on a red rag when he heard the distant wail of tires, not the kind that come from teenagers showing off, the kind that come from something else. He looked up, eyes narrowing as a dark SUV passed the stop sign too fast and turned toward the direction Nora had walked. He didn't panic, he just folded the rag, placed it in his pocket, and started walking toward the corner. The corner of Maple and 5th was usually quiet by mid-morning. Old pumps, cracked asphalt, hand-painted sign that still read Pete's Gas and Market, even though Pete had passed 6 years ago. Ellis and Nora had been stopping there every week for over a decade. By the time Ellis reached the end of the block, he could see them, 3 armored vehicles, matte black, angled like jaws around the gas station canopy. One officer was already stringing up yellow tape. Another stood on top of a car, scanning the street with binoculars. The third, younger, tense, was yelling into a handheld radio. Ellis stepped closer slowly, like he was approaching a skittish animal. He could see Nora now. She stood near pump 4, a paper coffee cup in one hand, receipt fluttering in the other. Her shoulders were raised, not in panic, but confusion. Her mouth moved, trying to reason with them. She wasn't shouting, she never shouted. 3 officers had formed a half-circle around her. One had his hand resting on a taser holster. Another was barking orders too quickly for anyone to follow. The third kept repeating something into a body cam mic. From across the street, Ellis heard one clear sentence, "Ma'am, drop the coffee now." Nora didn't understand. She raised her free hand instead, not fast, not threatening, just enough to say, "I'm not a danger." The youngest officer flinched. Another yelled, "Non-compliant." But what Ellis did next will leave you stunned. Ellis moved faster now. He stepped off the sidewalk past the newsstand toward the chaos, and then he cracked the sound of a taser fired. He watched the coffee fly first, then the cup, then Nora. She hit the pavement without a sound. The team turned, and now their weapons were pointed at him. "Step back, sir. This is an active scene." Ellis froze mid-step, arms raised, his palms open, not trembling, not defensive, just deliberate. "She's my wife," he said calmly. "She was just paying for gas." The lead officer raised his voice over the others. "Secure the perimeter. Lock it down. That's our suspect's handler." Ellis blinked. "Handler?" But no one answered. One of the younger officers shoved him back with a forearm to the chest, hard enough that Ellis nearly tripped over the curb. Across the lot, Nora lay on her side, still twitching, the taser barbs stuck awkwardly near her collarbone. Her dress was torn at the sleeve. Her glasses had skidded beneath the pump. "Don't move, sir." Another voice barked. Ellis didn't, but his eyes stayed fixed on Nora. She wasn't speaking, not crying, just blinking slowly, one hand gripping the concrete as if trying to press herself back into reality. "Why did you tase her?" Ellis asked, his voice low. She ignored commands, the officer replied flatly. "We believe she was reaching." "For what? Her purse?" His tone sharpened. "That's enough." The team leader stepped between them. "Hands on the vehicle now." Ellis placed his palms on the hood of the nearest squad car. The metal was warm from the sun. Behind him, zip ties tightened around his wrists. "She has a heart condition," Ellis said quietly. The officer paused. "Then she should have complied." Ellis closed his eyes, the sounds around him grew distant, radios crackling, boots shifting, one officer coughing from nerves. Then he opened them and looked at the man in charge, the one with the rank pins and the rigid posture, and he spoke 5 words, not shouted, not whispered, just said them: "Call Admiral Wren right now." The commander's brow furrowed. "What?" Ellis didn't flinch. "Call him before you regret this." Someone snorted. "You think name-dropping?" "Check your coordinates," Ellis interrupted. "This is 1142 South Maple. You were dispatched to 1142 North Maple. 2 different blocks, 2 different zip codes." The youngest officer paled visibly. The team leader hesitated, then reached for his radio. Ellis added one more sentence, his voice steady as ever: "Left pocket, inside lining." "Look, don't touch." The team leader gave a nod to one of the older officers who approached Ellis cautiously. 2 gloved fingers slipped inside the lining of Ellis's jacket exactly where he said. Out came a black metallic badge, dull from time, but unmistakable to anyone who'd served more than a few years. Not police, not retired army, this was deep command protocol, Tier 1 classified. The officer held it for a moment, eyes narrowing. Then he stepped back silently, showing it to the commander. Everything slowed, the barking stopped. The weapons didn't lower, but the men behind them were no longer shouting. A breeze picked up, paper napkins fluttered near the pump where Nora still lay, one hand now curled near her chest. Ellis looked at no one, he didn't move, just stood, zip-tied, grease on his sleeves, sweat on his collar. The commander finally spoke, quieter now. "Who are you?" Ellis's answer was just as calm: "Someone who built the system you're misusing, sir." One of the younger men started, but the older officer cut him off. "That badge isn't just military. It's ghost clearance." Someone else whispered, "What the hell is ghost clearance?" The commander ignored them. He turned to the team, "Re-verify the address. Dispatch confirmation now." 2 officers stepped aside, working radios, typing furiously into tablets. Ellis looked toward Nora, then spoke again, "She needs medical attention." Still, no one moved. Finally, the commander called out, voice breaking the silence, "Get a medic in here now." Boots shifted, weapons dipped slightly. A man in tactical gloves knelt beside Ellis and sliced the zip ties, the plastic snapped. Ellis didn't thank them, he knelt beside Nora and gently pressed 2 fingers against her neck, pulse, weak but steady. She opened her eyes, unfocused but breathing. The medic arrived seconds later, a trauma kit in hand, now moving with the urgency that should have come 10 minutes earlier. Across the lot, one of the younger officers was on the phone, his voice trembling as he said, "Yes, Admiral Wren." "Yes, sir." "Yes, it's him. It's really him." 20 minutes later, the sirens were gone, so was the shouting, but no one had left. The SWAT unit stood in loose formation behind their vehicles, radios holstered, hands off their weapons. None of them spoke. A few looked toward the street where neighbors stood quietly filming from porches and sidewalks. Ellis sat beside Nora on a bench outside the station's small market wall. She leaned against him, an ice pack now pressed between her chest and her coat. Her hand stayed wrapped around his fingers. The medic had cleared her vitals, no cardiac event, just bruising and shock. Still, the tension around her body hadn't faded. The command vehicle's door opened, the SWAT leader stepped out, helmet now under one arm, posture tense. Before he could say anything, a new vehicle rolled up clean, government-plated, no sirens, just presence. A charcoal gray SUV came to a silent stop behind the cruisers. The man who emerged wore no uniform, but everyone knew he outranked the room. Admiral Jonathan Wren, silver haircut razor straight, his walk crisp, even in civilian shoes. He didn't look around, he didn't acknowledge the SWAT team, he walked straight toward Ellis. The two men locked eyes. A moment passed. Then Wren lifted his hand and offered a full salute. Ellis returned it slower, heavier, but it landed just the same. "You're not dead," Wren said quietly. "Not professionally," Ellis replied. Wren looked over his shoulder at the team, now pretending not to stare. "I got a call from someone panicking," Wren said louder now, "said they tossed a civilian at the wrong address, then told me the name of the man they zip-tied on the asphalt." He turned fully to face the SWAT commander. "You didn't detain a suspect," he said coldly. "You assaulted a former field director with command-level clearance." The commander opened his mouth. Wren didn't let him speak. "You didn't check the coordinates. You didn't verify the threat, and you ignored the very protocols this man helped write." One of the officers, the older one who had recognized the badge, finally whispered, "Ellis Monroe, that's him. He wrote the Tier 1 civilian response doctrine." No one else needed to speak after that. The air was still when Admiral Wren stepped forward again. He looked past the commander and directly at the young officer who had fired the taser. The kid looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past hour, sweat along his jaw, eyes darting between Ellis and the Admiral. "Your name?" Wren asked. "Officer Brett Collier, sir." "Not anymore." Wren didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. "Vest, weapon, badge. Now." The officer didn't argue, he pulled each item off with trembling hands and set them on the hood of a nearby cruiser. No ceremony, just silence. When he was done, he took 3 steps back, then sat on the curb like a student waiting for expulsion. Ellis watched it all, but said nothing. Wren turned back to him and reached inside his coat. He pulled out a sealed envelope. "This contains 2 things," he said, "a formal written apology from the agency, and a full reinstatement of your security clearance. We want you back." Ellis didn't take it. He looked toward Nora, still seated under the store awning with a blanket around her shoulders. She was watching, but she didn't speak. "My clearance belongs to her now," Ellis said. Ron nodded, but his shoulders sank a little. He placed the envelope gently on the bench beside Ellis. "The offer stands. If the world ever needs you again, it always needs something," Ellis said. "But it rarely learns." A murmur ran through the SWAT unit behind them, not mockery, not defiance, just awareness. Every single one of them had seen the shift from control to humility, from noise to gravity. The commander tried again, voice quieter now. "Sir, we were told this was a threat operation, high-risk narcotics." "You didn't think," Ellis replied calmly. "You acted, and you hurt someone who only wanted a coffee." He walked back to Nora, helped her to her feet. As they moved toward their truck, a young officer bent to pick up her dropped glasses. He handed them to her wordlessly, his eyes lowered. She took them with a nod. Sometimes redemption didn't come in speeches, just in silence. 3 weeks passed. Nora's bruises faded, but something in her had changed. She stood a little straighter at the grocery store. She didn't flinch when a patrol car rolled by, and when the manager offered her a free coffee that first day back, she accepted, but held his gaze until he looked down. Ellis never opened the envelope Admiral Wren had left. It sat unopened on a bookshelf between a jar of spare keys and an old oil can. Some things didn't need a response to be answered. He kept fixing things: the ramp behind the library, a busted van at the shelter, a carburetor from the high school auto shop. But the town changed. 2 patrol cars now slowed in front of his house, not in surveillance, but in respect. Officers waved first, some even rolled down windows just to nod. And once, just once, a marked cruiser broke down 2 doors down. Ellis arrived before the officer even popped the hood, quiet, tools in hand. As they worked, the rookie finally spoke. "Sir, I heard what happened. You could have ended all their careers. Why didn't you?" Ellis tightened a bolt, then wiped his hands. "Because revenge doesn't rebuild engines," he said, "and it doesn't rebuild people either." Later that week, a reporter caught him at the VFW. "Mr. Monroe," she asked, "why just 5 words?" He looked her in the eye and answered, "Because some words don't shout, they land." Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories if you believe real strength speaks calmly. And comment respect if you know someone whose silence carried more power than noise.